And we are live. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you another Unlocking Age of Sigmar. We are back, and we are doing Kharadron Overlords with Tom Lyons. Welcome, Tom.
Hello, friends. So
we have done this once before, but it was previous to the GHB 17. And let me see if I remember. Something's changed since then, didn't they?
Yes, Mitch. Yes, KO have went through a number of pretty significant changes.
So we're going to go over some of that. I'm sure that anybody who's interested in KO probably already knows, but for any of our newer viewers or anybody new to Age of Sigmar, anybody maybe has been under a rock for a little while in the Age of Sigmar world, probably doesn't know about that. So we'll go over just briefly what some of those changes were, how they have impacted the army, and then we're going to go over some of Tom's lists. So before we get and talk to Tom just a little bit and find out what what your take is on the army, where they stand in the meta, for anybody who's new to this, the way that I do it and this whole unlocking series is we're going to do 3 lists. 2 of them are going to be with allies, 1 without. So we're going to try and give a little bit of a feel for the different ways that you can build out this army with the new rules. If you want to stay pure with with whatever the main faction is or the sub faction, or if you want to try to take advantage of the ally rules that were introduced when the General's Handbook 17 was launched. It's a different landscape, so that's the process. So Tom, why don't we learn a little bit about what your feeling is on where what's changed and where the Kharadron Overlords now fit in the meta compared to other competitive armies?
Yeah. Before they were really, really strong. And I would say now they are situationally strong. And what I mean by that is I think there's some hard counters to KO, but they have a really, really hard alpha strike. And so I think that they, when played correctly, when piloted well, they will perform exceedingly well, especially against people who are not prepared for them. Against people who know what they're doing, who know how to deploy, you can do pretty well in preparing yourself to stay protected from KO, is what I would say.
Okay, so it might depend on the scenario. It could very well depend on the scenery. There's some other factors. It could be what your matchup is. That's not all too different from a lot of armies, but KO definitely have some advantages. And hey, there is some Achilles heels. We're going to go over some of those details. If you were to explain to somebody how this army plays in as general terms as possible, because we're going to dig deeper into the war scrolls and the like, if you were to explain to somebody what's the feeling of this army, if somebody was new to AOS and they were just kind of exploring either the aesthetic or the play style, and they were really looking for a new army, what would you say that KO is?
First, I would say don't. And I mean that just because they have a very low tolerance for bad play. And so if you don't know what you're doing with them and you set them on the table, if you're not careful with them, they will punish you.
Okay, so it's a challenge. It's more of an advanced player army, is what you're saying.
I would just say that it's it rewards very good play and it punishes bad play.
Okay.
And so I would say that I would warn people that it's not going to play like most other armies. It's a ranged army, but it's also a mobile army sometimes. And there's 2 very kind of divergent ways that you can build, of either being like very not mobile and very like gun line-ish, which has its own detriments, strengths and weaknesses. And there's a very mobile kind of ship, or there's a very mobile build is what I would say, using a lot of the balloon boys and maybe a ship. I think that there could be another competitive heavy ship list. There's a 3 ironclad list that did very well. And when I say very well, I think top 20 or so at the Grand GT. Maybe it was top 30. Needless to say, the 3 ironclad lists surprised a lot of people because a lot of people didn't anticipate. I mean, it's a lot of points in 3 very large ships. That said, most lists aren't going to be multi-ship. I think there is a competitive multi-ship list, and actually, I wouldn't say this is competitive. I would say that this is a fun very playable competitive, and that's one of the lists that we'll cover. Is I actually have like a air superiority list.
Yeah, you got some good titles, I think, also.
Thanks. So,
yeah. Let me just say this: there are, and this has come up recently. As a matter of fact, we talked about this in the early part of the show. There's lots of ways to build these lists, and there's lots of ways to build competitive lists. So this won't be the only time that I'm sure I'll do KO or any of these other sub-factions I've done. We're probably going to be revisiting these over time, and you never know. There could be different factors that might come into play. Things like when Firestorm gets released or whatnot. That changed a lot of stuff too, and I'm sure there's going to be more of that kind of thing that might change the landscape of any of these that we do. This is not the end-all, be-all, complete description of what this is capable of. It's just 3 specific lists. But you happen to be a very good list builder. And you're an extremely competent player in the competitive scene. So I think that they'll be not just effective, but we'll get some good insights. Anything you want to say before we jump in?
I love KO. I didn't always feel this way, but after my initial reaction, because it wasn't what I expected, I ended up actually falling in love with the army, and I have a very kind of seriously converted army that I'm working on. And so Vince and I are going to be taking, I'm taking a small portion of it to Holy Havoc, and then I'm planning on playing quite a bit of it for the next year or so.
Well, since you mentioned that, I know that Holy Havoc, first of all, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about Holy Havoc. I know it's a doubles event, and being that I've gone to Holy Wars, we actually went there together and spent some time there, and that was a great event. That was a singles event. It's not too different from that, but maybe you can tell a little bit about. We can plug a little bit of Stephen Hurd's event.
Yeah, so Steve runs fairly exclusive events. What I mean by that is they are 30-person events that generally sell out within the first couple minutes of opening. So they're events in extremely high demand, and the reason why is these events have 15 tables, and he actually has a total of 20 tables or so built. But any one event will have 15 tables with its own set of dedicated terrain, structure, layout, and their own scenarios built into the event itself. And so whether you're at Holy Wars or Holy Havoc, everything is custom. Everything is custom built. He'll have some staple terrain like a Skullbane Mance, or he'll have Witch Fate Tor. He'll have some of those big set piece terrain stuff, but almost everything else is handmade. And so it's just beautiful terrain. He the board that premiered at Holy Wars when we were there last year was this huge table for Izir, and it was a bunch of floating earth moats with stairs in between all of the earth moats. Which, let me just say, with my KO list, I am begging to build, because that is a playground for my army if it has ever seen one. But
there are some that might give you nightmares too. I think we both played on one on our own individual nightmare board. But they're great scenarios. They're really interesting because you're not just playing the scenario. You're playing the environment. You're playing the terrain. There's a lot of stuff that comes into play. I think it's fun. It really keeps you on your toes. There's a lot of ways to win or completely crash and burn.
Yeah, I mean, it's built to challenge folks, and it's built to the tables. You're playing against the enemy as much as you're playing against the table itself, because the table is doing auto wounds often to people who are attempting to achieve objectives, and there are 4 objectives that you're juggling. And so you're playing the scenario, and you're playing a secret objective that you've chosen, and oftentimes there are other scenario objectives that are ongoing, and so you're juggling 4 of these objectives at all points in time. So it really actually tests generalmanship and how well you can balance all this information. And so in 2 weeks, the Holy Havoc event that we are going to is a teams event, and so Vince and I are going to compete. The beautiful iron jaws that folks have seen being painted up, Vince is doing for this event, and I'm doing my KO. And we are doing a reimagined Dogs of War army. Mine are based on Long Drong's Slayer pirates. And so I thought, why not floating Sky Fire Slayer pirates?
So you have a picture of that, just so you know, everybody in the audience. it's not just like in any other main event. It's not just what you've painted with your army.
Yep.
It's also the board. So you have something that you want to share with us? I can go ahead and
yeah. Here, let me just share. I have a bunch of photos, but I'll just cycle through some of them real quick for folks so they can see my army and see.
I'm gonna. Yeah. All right. You want me to click on you, or are you gonna?
Yeah, just go ahead and click on me.
Okay, there you go. All right. First of all, this is a gorgeous army, incredibly well converted. But I do have to say, you know, props to Daka Des for saying that he wanted to know if you had hair superiority instead of air superiority with this army. I don't know. That's a pretty good one. We got to give points. Points to you, Daka Des.
You indeed have hair superiority, Daka. So worry not, Des. Worry not.
All right.
Yeah. So I have poured a lot of time over the last couple months into this army, as you can see, and I'm bringing the heat, literally. And so it'll be a fun matchup. I've done a lot of conversions in addition to just the helms. Like this is one of my chemists with my Aether Buster, because I know I'll be running chemists with Aether Busters. So he has his Aether Buster rifle here with an extra pistol, and he's seen some stuff. Lost a leg in the process. This is one of my chemists. But yeah, and then here's another one of my normal chemists, and so. And then here's the board. You guys are going to get a snapshot into my board that I am currently working on.
I love it. So I saw this in an early stage that you showed on your show on Warhammer Weekly, but now look at this.
I'm in base coating phase. Oh. So some of it has been dry brushed, and I've done some detailing on a couple, like the stone stuff is all largely done. Not the volcanic rock, but like the actual dwarven stone stuff. And some of this, the lighting's bad, so you can't see, but there's like a keep door back here, and there's statues and all that. So all that's done. And then I'm doing detailing, and this is all just base coats on my glowing. And so all of that will have my lava glow effects.
So is this supposed to be a skyport in the sky, or is this on the ground?
So this is a skyport that's built into a mountain. And so this is part Fire Slayer hold and part skyport, and that's part of what this that's part of the conceit of this army, is that it's a merger of KO and Fire Slayers.
Is there any landing pad area? I see some areas that look like they could be.
And so there's some docks back here you can dock a ship. And so at the end of the day, what this will be, like this whole thing will be glowing lava. You can see the big skull in the mountain that's pouring out the lava.
Nice.
And there's a area back here for a frigate. And then when it's done, there'll be an area up here for my ironclad.
Sweet.
And then, and so what this will let me do is largely take some combination of Fire Slayer and or KO lists with this army and with this board, because everything's going to be converted. Both my KO are going to look like my Fire Slayers. My Fire Slayers are going to look like my KO. So I'll have a combination of both sets. So
nice. There's going to be some disparity in the color schemes, because if I remember correctly, the Iron Jaws that Vince is painting has more of a blue overall view.
He does.
Color scheme.
He does. His
but I think it might complement each other, though.
Yeah, his blue is more of a teal, where my blue is more of like a dark navy, and you can see that in like the collar, for example, of this guy.
Got it.
You can see some of my blue here, but mine is definitely going to be a darker blue. But I don't think they need to be the same. In fact, they probably should be different. His are based on Ruglug's Armored Orcs, and so they've hacked off armor from Stormcast. In fact, a combination of Stormcast and Tzeentch, and so they have done their work. Those updated Ruglug's Orcs, and so they're a combination of Ruglug's Orcs, Armored Orcs, and what's the Halfling Warband? Lumpkin's Fighting Cocks. And so they're a combination of those two armies is what Vince is doing. And so that's what he has. And they've tamed some of the Stormcast Chocobos, and they've even, as everybody has seen, the Maw Crusher is a tamed, a broken Lord of Change. That a breeding program between the Chocobos and the Lord of Change that the Orcs have done.
It's a funky chicken.
It is indeed a funky chicken.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what how you guys perform. I'm sure you're going to get some really good hobby scores, and I wouldn't doubt that you guys will do well when it comes to the tournament. But I'm looking forward to.
I don't know. Brad and Andrea are bringing double Star Drakes.
Really?
So yeah, I'm pretty anxious about that.
Wait, double Star Drakes each?
Each one is bringing it's 1,000 points each. And
it's 1,000.
And each one is bringing a Star Drake in their 1,000-point list.
That's half the list. Each of their lists.
Yes. Well, it's
dangerous.
Vince is bringing a Maw Crusher, so
yeah, no. That's not cheap either. How many points is a Maw Crusher?
Like 460 now, 440, 420, somewhere in there.
Yes,
they've it down a little bit, but still,
it's maybe 60 points less than a Star Drake. So yeah,
it's so expensive though.
Still, impressive, but still, it'll be great to hear how that turned out. I'm sure we'll get some good coverage from you. All right, thanks. So why don't we go ahead and jump into the lists? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm actually finally getting good at doing this where we don't see the infinity view. So
no worries.
Yeah, I finally figured it out.
Apparently, I don't know how to operate my screen, given the number of floating Tom's YouTube homepage that are out there right now that shows all of what my kids watch on television.
Okay, so I'm gonna go pull up the first. Let me just get rid of that. I'll go put up the main list, and then as you go through it, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to pop in with whatever War Scrolls or battalion information I have. I do have, actually from the first time, I do have like the grudges and the command abilities. If you want me to pull those up, just let me know. Things like the embarking rules. If you need that, I have that available too.
Okay.
All right, so let's go get your first list. I love the name of this list too. This is not my favorite of your names, but I love that you've named them. So go ahead.
Yeah, so let me do a kind of a preface. Each of these three lists, they serve a very particular function. And I wanted to highlight some of the diversity that's available. And so I did what I consider the most competitive list. That's this first one, the Zilfin Clown Car. But there are two additional lists that I wanted to show what a foot list for KO looks like, and then I wanted to show what a heavy ship list, if somebody wanted a more competitive heavy ship list, what that might look like. And so this is the first one. This is what I consider probably one of the most competitive lists on the scene. That said, folks, Gary Percival placed very well. I think he was overall 8th, maybe 7th, with a KO list, and his list looked nothing like any of these lists. And I think that his was a perfectly serviceable list, and it has kind of the key or the essential elements. But I would argue that this is probably a more optimized version of that list. So I think there's value in all of these lists. Let me just say that. So I don't want to discount Gary at all. And I would encourage you, by the way, to have Gary on the show.
I would be happy to have him reach out to me. I'd be happy to schedule a follow-up with his point of view and hear how he tells me that you have no idea what you're talking about, and he's the guy that everybody should be listening to.
Hey, he's the one that finished in the top 10 at the Grand Tournament for GW.
Yeah, that says a lot. That says
a lot. It does. He's a great player.
I'm looking for some of the accomplished players for some of the other lists, like Seraphon and anybody who's a really high-level Beastman player. Well, I would love to do it with Vince, but it doesn't mean I can't bring another person in for their point of view. But I'd like to find some more people outside of our usual suspects, and see, especially people that have actually placed high, and just find out how they've done it. I've gotten a couple people on already. Okay, so. Is it Zilfin Clown Car?
Zilfin. Ziflin is what most people want to say, but it's Zilfin.
Zilfin. Okay.
Yes. So let me talk through these. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Skyport Zilfin. 2 of my 3 lists are going to use Zilfin. And so for KO, when you choose Kharadron Overlord Allegiance, you will either create your own Skyport, which can be really beneficial at times. But I, in general, don't like it as much as some of the... If you choose one of the preset ones, you'll often get an extra ability or two. that gets thrown in, and unlock like a special item for your ships, or unlock a special command trait or something like that. And so in general, a lot of people that I've seen, a lot of the more competitive crowd, are choosing to go with those set skyports. And premier amongst these is Zilfin. And so let me run through the set of abilities, because this will really kind of lay out, like kind of pave the way for 2 of the 3 lists here. And so for them, they all get an article, an amendment, and a footnote, and then you get to choose an additional footnote, and then each of the ones get a special ability. So for their article, which is a universal ability that's always on, Zilfin gets to reroll all hits and wound rolls of 1 for units if they're targeting, if their target, whoever they're attacking, can fly. Which anytime you get to reroll 1s to hit and wound is fantastic. But the reality is that in our meta, most of the big scary things fly. You know, you think through it, and all of your big scary monsters, all your big bosses, Lords of Change, and so you go through like Lords of Change and Maw Crushes and Star Drakes, and all of it, every single one of them flies.
Well, it's an extremely valuable ability when mobility is one of the best, or or if not the most important thing to consider in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, and even Alariel, who you wouldn't anticipate flies. And so this gives your entire army, every single model, a reroll 1s to hit and wound. Whether they're shooting, whether they're in melee, everything. And with a lot of these attacks that hit on 2s or 3s, or wound on 2s or 3s, it's going to go really well for you if you're rerolling all the 1s that you drop. Okay, so that's your article. The amendment is called Don't Argue with the Wind, and if you run a sky vessel, which is going to be any of your ships, you're always considered to have rolled a 6, which that's pretty good. Whenever you normally need to run, you need some distance, and this automatically grants you a 6.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just a nice, handy, extra kind of Benny. The footnote, the footnote special to Zilfin is called "There's Always a Breeze If You Look for It," and this is one of the 2 kind of key abilities that I consider Zilfin to have. Don't worry, don't get me wrong. I love the rerolls of 1s to hit and wound for targets that fly, but that's not why I'm buying into this. Buying into this skyport. And the reason why I really like the skyport is because this is one of the abilities, and it's called, there's always a breeze if you look for it. 1 per battle in your hero phase, 1 of your sky vessels, so that's going to be your ships, where everybody's boarded onto, or a lot of people are at least, can immediately move as if it were the movement phase. Although it cannot run, it cannot do this in a turn that it descended using aetheric engines. And I'll talk about what aetheric engines are in just a minute. And it can act normally for the remainder of your turn, including allowing embarked units to disembark in the hero phase.
Nice.
And so what this does is 1 per game, 1 of your ships gets a free move. And then it can take its turn, because it's in the hero phase. And so you unload people from your ship in the hero phase. And so this gives your ship an 8-inch foot push forward before you unload anybody. And so this can actually put all of your balloon boys literally at 3-inch charges on a standard move, or very close to a 3-inch charge away from the enemy, depending on what abilities that you're using and what synergies and stuff like that. So it moves you very close, is what I would say. And so this gives you one of those really kind of good options to shorten your charges in that first turn, for that first turn blitz. So the second footnote, everybody gets to choose the second footnote in addition to the first from their skyport. And I basically always choose there's no trading with some people. This is another 1 per battle and ability, as are basically all footnotes. And when you do it, when you cause any unsaved wounds to an enemy made from an attack from 1 of your units, you can roll a d6 and the enemy suffers an additional d3 mortal wounds.
Oof. It's going to happen. I mean, it seems like it's just a no-brainer. You're going to have some unsaved wounds.
Yep. And so I'm going to get some wounds through on something like a Star Drake, super shielded Star Drake. I'm going to put some wounds through. Something's going to sneak through, and then I can punch through with an extra d3. Or if I take there's always that hero that you get down to 1 or 2 wounds. you know, that you almost kill, but you know you don't put enough wounds through. And this is that extra oomph that you could just be like, okay, I'm going to do an additional D3 mortal wounds to that guy.
Jeez. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Impressive.
And so it's just an extra, and you need to understand this army has almost no mortal wounds natively, like 0. And so they're really hurting for mortal wounds. Now they have rend out the wazoo. And so, but anyways, yeah. So.
And this is for every. Is there what? If I did miss this, is this for all of their attacks, or is it?
No, just once per battle, once per game. When I need an extra, if I need an extra D3 mortal wounds on somebody, if I've put a wound through, I can
from that model on one model.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's what I meant. It's not. You don't have to pick like a weapon. It's anything that you've done.
No. Yep.
Oh,
anytime I do any wounds. Once per game, I can do an additional D3 extra.
Wow, okay. That's great. I love it.
Because, yeah, it's that circumstantial, like, okay, I've done some wounds. I need to do a little bit more. I'm going to put it on this guy. Yep.
Great.
And then finally, the last one is Superlative Sailors. Whenever one of these Zilfin sky vessels suffers a mortal wound, you roll a dice. On a 6, that mortal wound is ignored. And so it gives your ships a little bit of mortal wound protection. Not a lot, but just a little, just enough.
Yeah, it comes up. it comes up
occasionally. Yeah. Yes.
One time in 6.
One time in 6, and with most of your ships are going to be between 14 and 18 or 14, 18 wounds.
Right.
So if you have like a heavy mortal wounding army like Tzeentch, it'll give you a couple extra wounds against them. So okay, so let's get to how the actual force works. As you can tell, you're going to deploy a metric crap ton of your troops in your frigate. So none of your go back to the army thing real quick, because we don't really need to talk about the frigate. It can do a little bit of work, but that's, I mean, but so the key here is that you can see those 3 sets of 9 Endrin riggers. I run with 7 saws and 2 grapples. Those Endrin riggers, none of them take up space in the boat.
Really?
Yes. And so if you can jump to the frigate real quick.
And now you want the frigate.
I do, because I wanted people to see the troops.
Okay.
If you go down to normally when you set them up, if you look down where like the setup and overburden is in the middle, the setup, you can set up with additional units. So all those units are being put into the ship, and you can basically put up to 10 units into the ship, or 15 total. Anything over 10 is going to start to slow your ship down.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, they have different carrying capacity on each of these.
Yep.
And this is the second to the largest. This is the middle one, right?
Yeah, this is the middle one. This is the only one. This is the smallest one that can still carry bodies.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And so what you do is you put 10 of your foot soldiers in there. You put your 2 heroes, and you can put, and then none of the people who have balloons on their backs ever take up like cargo space for bodies. So you put 27 of the balloon guys in the ship with those other 12. You can immediately see where this clown car joke comes from, because this stuff is on like a 90-inch by like 50-some-inch base, or maybe like 120 by 90. So not a very large round base. You have like you are spewing out of this 40 models. Out of
but they're dwarves.
Base.
Come on, let's be realistic. They are dwarves. Yes, they're in enclosed space suits, but they are dwarves.
They are indeed. And so what this allows you to do, and so what's significant about this? So you're going to drop that ship, or you're going to deploy the ship with all that stuff loaded onto it, and then you're going to deploy 2 other units of 10 Archnaut Company, which are your battle line. One of the 10 is going to be on the ship. And so you can kind of put those guys wherever. You can have them on objectives. You can spread them out. You can have them on the line if you want. You don't have to. At 3 drops, you're going to outdrop most people. A handful of the other competitive lists that I've been seeing people running, most of them are running 3 drops or more. So you should at least have a chance at a roll-off. And so for deploying the frigate, you have one of 2 options. You can deploy it on the table. And so in this list actually takes advantage of the fact that you have supreme flexibility on deployment. because you can deploy in one of two places. You can deploy on the table, and your general has the ability called Fleet Master. And what that allows you to do is, after everything is down on the table, but before the first turn begins, you can pick up your frigate and redeploy it anywhere within your area.
So it's a fake out.
Yes. So for Fleet Master, you can put your ship down, then let them finish deploying. And so this actually takes away one of the major penalties of being a low drop army. So one of the penalties of low drop armies is that you put everything out and they respond by deploying their stuff. Okay.
Nice.
And then they know where your stuff is, so they put certain things within range and hide certain things, whatever. Well, what this lets you to do is let them deploy in response, and then you just re-pick up your ship with all 40 guys on it and put it somewhere else in your zone.
Nice.
So that you can come at them at an unguarded flank. So that's one deployment option that you have. Another deployment option you have is the item that you've taken for your ship. All ships basically get like one kind of special item, and it's called Aetherspheric Engines. And yeah, I'm here. Sorry. So the Aetherspheric Engines, what they are is they're the special kind of unlock that the frigate has, or that Zilfin as a skyport has. And what it lets you do is you can instead deploy your ship in the Aethersphere, and then I can airdrop onto the board 9 inches from any enemy. And so alternatively, if you don't want to deploy it on the table initially and then redeploy it, you can actually instead deploy it in the heavens and drop it 9 inches out from the enemy line.
When are you making that decision? Is that at the point of deployment?
Yes. So when you choose to deploy it, you can put it on the table, or you can put it in the Aethersphere.
Or put it to the side. Got it.
Yes. Now, what I don't know is, and I need to reread the wording, I believe you may be, because of the way Fleet Master is worded, it says you can pick it up and deploy it anywhere in your area. You may actually be able to deploy it in the Aethersphere and then choose to instead put it on the table with...
because of the reposition, yeah.
Because of the reposition. I need to reread the wording, but I'm pretty sure you might be able to do that.
Okay, so don't hold us to that, audience.
Right, don't hold us to that, but I think that you might be able to do that technically, even though people would be pretty pissed if they don't agree with you. There would need to be like a judge ruling or something like that. So you'll need to talk about it and clear them before you start playing. Right. Well, all this ironically is happening before you start playing. You get the idea. And so now, but the key is if you drop from the Aethersphere, you cannot use the, there's a wind when you're looking, you can't use the, there's always a breeze when you're looking for it. That was in that rules that you can't use that if you drop from the Aethersphere this turn. And you can't move in that turn. And so what ends up, and anybody that you deploy out of your ship has to be farther than 9 inches from the enemy as well.
Oh, that's a big deal. Because if you deploy the ship too close, then the guys popping out have to be basically to the side or behind.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And so what you do is you deploy 12 inches out. Then you put your line that you have the guys when they jump out of the ship at 9 inches. So I mean, it's actually not a bad thing because you don't want your ship on the front line.
Have you played with the deployment of this with measurements?
I have.
Good. Like any good competitor would.
Yeah, and when you do, like, you can actually get an additional inch on most of these guys' bases because your guys have to be within 3 inches of your ship. And so when you do that, most of the balloon guys are all 32 mil bases. And so you're going to get in over an additional inch. With their back edge within 3 inches, you're going to gain an additional inch. And so where this is significant is not when you do this Aether drop, because then you have 9-inch charges, and we'll get to this when we talk about engine riggers. You can mitigate those charges a little bit. But what's actually significant is when you start on the line, let's say that you, instead of Aethersphere dropping, you start on the line somewhere. Okay? Well, at the top of your first turn, you can use there's always a breeze when you look for it, and move an additional 8 inches or so, 9 inches. You can kick some people out of your boat. So if you go to the frigate real quick, you'll see that they have a movement of they have a base movement of 10 inches. And so if you keep everybody in the boat, you'll have a movement of 8 inches. Base.
Okay.
And so if you unload, normally what you're probably going to do is unload 1 or 2 people, or potentially the unit of 10 company. It just depends on what the situation is. But you can get up to 10 additional inches of movement. So there's normally 24 inches between the 2 lines. Let's say they've deployed on the line somewhere. Okay? So you can open with a 10-inch move, which closes that distance to 14 inches. Okay? From 24. Are you tracking?
I am.
So when you disembark in the hero phase, so that's the free move, is that 10-inch move. So you disembark in the hero phase, you have to be within 3 inches, okay? So when you deploy your company, or not your company, when you deploy all your balloon boys, your first deployment of those guys, some of the guys are going to be, the front edge of those units are going to be over 4 inches out from that point, because they have to deploy within 3 inches, so the back edge of their base is within 3. The rest of their base pushes them out to 4 inches, okay? So you're going to gain 4 inches in deployment. So you're going to go from 14 inches from their line to 10 inches from their line, okay? Mm-hmm. Now let's go to the Endrin Riggers.
You got it.
So these guys are 10 inches from the enemy line, and...
Yep, just pulling them up. There you go.
They have a 12-inch move.
Yeah.
So now
because they're balloon boys, yeah.
They're balloon boys. So they have a 12-inch fly move. So that means that when they deploy, they're going to be 2 inches deep into the enemy line before they even need to think about making a charge.
Nice.
Now they can cover some additional movement because of how I've equipped them. I've given each of my units 2 grapnel launchers. I could have up to 3. Some people run 3, but I don't want to lose too much of combat effectiveness, and I like to gamble. So I run with 2 grapnel launchers, and what that allows me to do is, and by the way, anybody that's heard me talk about KO know just how good Endrin Riggers are. From the very first, I highlighted that they are the MVPs right now of the Army, them and chemists. Them, chemists, and light skyhooks. And so what the grapnel launchers do is I can choose a terrain feature or a unit, a friend or foe unit that has a wounds characteristic of 10 or more that's within 24 inches of my unit, okay? And then I roll a dice for basically each grapple hook I have. So I roll 2 dice. If I roll a 4 or more on either of those dice, my grapnel launcher has snagged on the target, and I can immediately move this unit any distance towards the target up to when I contact them, which is 24 inches. And I can't finish this move closer than 3 inches from any enemy model. So this can help me close the rest of the distance to any of the enemy monsters, or let's say that, and this is happening, by the way, at the end of the shooting phase. So let's take that where I've dropped from the Aether Sphere. I've pumped these guys out to 9 inches from the line, and within 24 inches straight ahead, and this is why lining up is going to be really important, because you're going to want to line up with a terrain piece 24 inches directly across the enemy line, or an enemy monster in their back line. Because what you want to do is you're going to shoot that monster with a grapple hook and pull your entire unit 24 inches towards them. And you can either end in a gap 3 inches farther away from any of their models. If they have like a chaff line and then a backfield, you can end up in their backfield 3 inches away from any of their models, or you can end up from the front of their line 3 inches out. So you have a 3-inch charge on that front line. And so they have lots of options for covering distance, and all 3 of these units of 9 have this double grapple hook option. Now, they have the mobility, we've observed that, but do they have the killing power? And indeed they do. Endrin Riggers, each one of those guys that's not carrying the grapples, so 7 of the 9 are going to have the rapid fire rivet guns, which means that each of those units will have 21 attacks at 3 up, 4 up, -1, rend 1 damage. So they can put out some pain. And then you have 2 chemists in your army. So what you'll likely do is to send 1 or 2 units of these guys forward, and then have a second wave of these guys charge in, 1 or 2, depending on what you need and how many units are going to have in combat, and activations and all that other stuff. And so you're going to send at least 2 units forward, buffed to the teeth by a chemist. They're going to buff their aethermatic saws, and so they're going to fire 21 shots into the enemy. that have a little bit of rend that's going to do a damage. It's going to probably do 3 to 4 wounds on average. Not a lot more, but enough. And then they're going to come in with their Aethermatic Saws. There you have 7 of these guys with saws, and then the captain's going to gain 1 extra. And so you'll have 8 base attacks. If you hit them with the chemist, they're going to go to 15 base attacks. And these saws are hitting on 3-up, wounding on 2-up, -2 rend, D3 damage each.
It's just an amazing stat line.
So 15 attacks at that profile, and you could technically have 2 units buffed up. So you could have 30 attacks at that profile from 2 units. Or if you send in the 3rd unit, like you really want to do damage and you're not concerned about buffing them, you're going to send in a 3rd unit unbuffed with 8 additional attacks. So you could get 38 attacks at this and then you're going to have 63 shots, gunshots, coming from this. And this is going to be deep in the enemy line. This is top of 1. This is before they've done anything, before they put up Vital Shock immunity, before anything. This is that alpha strike that everybody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just painful. And they're going to put out a lot of damage. And if any of those targets, and here's the most insulting thing about this. And if any of those targets are flying, they re-roll 1s on that 3-up 2.
I know. I was just thinking about that.
So they're converting almost all of those hits on 3-up 2-up to wounds.
So what would you consider, because this is pretty devastating, what would you consider to be a counter to this? How would you defend against it?
Nurgle.
Well, Nurgle is a defense against a lot of things. Would you consider a means to, if you have horde armies, to try to control some board? Is there bubble wrapping that can help? Is there a way to deploy that can help? Other than building a list, is there something that you can do to try to help mitigate this? Because I can see what you're talking about in terms of having a screening unit, line of units, and being able to kind of skip over some stuff. How would you, on the other side, other than just having a Nurgle list, how would you try to in some ways minimize the effectiveness of not only this mobility but the 1-2 punch on turn 1?
Yeah, so I mean, there's 2 ways to deal with this list. One is to be able to weather the storm. And
not everyone can.
And not everybody can. And so Nurgle does that. Like Plague Bearers are these guys, like the doom of this army, because they're -2 to hit and shooting, -1 to hit and melee. And they're all on foot, so you're not getting any of your rerolls. And it's just a ton of wounds, and they have the bonus save, and
right.
And the reality, they will outlast you. They will outgrind down this army. There's just no question about that.
Right. How about debuffs? Having the ability to kind of debuff that to hit roll.
That's, I mean, and that will help as well. Obviously, the -2 to hit, -1 to hit in melee for the Plague Bearers. So that's one way, is to weather the storm. Not a lot of armies can do that. Yeah. And let me point out, like even Stormcast, like these guys are all at -2 rend. That means that 1/3 of the attacks automatically get through, even if you reroll 1s. Remember that.
Right.
Even at a 2-up reroll 1s, 1/3 will always go through, because you determine rerolls before the rend gets applied. Which means that if let's say you're a 2-up reroll 1s, if you roll a 2 or a 3, and you don't have if you're a 2-up reroll 1s and you roll a 2 or a 3, you will fail on a 2 or a 3.
Right. So let me ask you this: if I remember correctly, the Stormcast was Liberators. They have some ability that if there are units behind it, they get a benefit from is it a debuff? Right. So that can help. So
you're thinking about the Protectors.
You just go after the Liberators and remove them from the board.
No, that's the Protectors, or a battalion would be the Liberators.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Nobody runs that battalion, and so it would have to be the Protectors.
Right. Okay.
And these guys would just go into the Protectors and eliminate
them. Is exactly what. You're going to sacrifice something. Right.
Yeah, and you're going to eliminate But the key is that so weathering the storm against these guys. The other armies that would probably do fairly well are armies that aren't on the table. And I know that sounds really silly.
We don't allow that option either.
But one of the best defenses is just not being there.
Yeah, I can't do that with 60 zombies. If only I could.
Right.
If only I had the means to just have them come up out of the ground, which would be a beautiful mechanic, AGW,
Sure.
if you're listening.
Sure. Yeah,
Not
and
happening.
I'm thinking about like Stormcast and Fire Slayers, where your key pieces just aren't able to be attacked.
Right.
So what you can do is you can begin playing the game with a handful of units, and you play the waiting game to see who pops on who first.
Right. I guess you could do it if when I'm thinking about death, I'm thinking Night Haunt. If they just have a few of the characters on the table hidden, out of view, out of sight, maybe not in a position where you can you can was it drop into middle of the table to be able to see them and then blow them off the board, but then just have the vast majority of your army come in. Or
some
would it be who else would it be? Would Sylvaneth be able to do that where they're off the board almost entirely?
Could. Yep. Yeah. Sylvaneth could deploy in the trees. Right. Fire Slayers could as well.
Fire Slayers, exactly.
Yeah, Fire Slayers are one of my favorite counters to this.
What can't Fire Slayers do?
Well,
yeah, there's a few things.
Why I'm a joint Fire Slayer KO player. I mean, what I would say is that like Fire Slayers, they're in this magic situation where they can actually like they'll deploy one of their Volkite blocks, which is a really tough unit. Like it's a really tough don't get me wrong, like it'll get chopped up by this Alpha Strike. But what's going to happen is it'll get chopped up, and then the other two blocks will Alpha Strike.
Right.
Like so, the KO will blow their Alpha Strike, and then the Fire Slayer will drop their other two Volkites and just obliterate and blow the whole KO off the table because the KO can't take punches back, and that's the problem. Is that if you can weather the first punch and then punch them back really hard, they'll fall apart.
Okay. And I wanted to spend some time on these guys because these guys are like the star of the army in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And knowing how to counter them, not just what they're doing, but what you need to do. I mean, if you have a big horde army and you can make layers of defenses where they're not going to be able to get close enough to the bulk of your really important stuff, you're going to lose those first two layers of crap, which could be a hurtful thing, and then you have to be able to counterattack. That's what I'm thinking from that standpoint. Or there's other ways to maybe mitigate their ability to shoot with things, with debuffs. There's certainly some aspects to it. It's not impossible, but you better be on your toes thinking about this. These guys are going to ruin your game before you get a turn.
Right. Yeah. Like Change Host is a good example of that. Like a Change Host with just 200 horrors would do well against this type of army,
right?
Especially if it's the Change Host maybe deploys with maybe 400 points in reinforcements, and then they do have a bunch of pink horrors. They split into blues and brimstones, where they could where their chaff lines are replenishing themselves. They could realistically and then what's going to happen is that their chaff lines will all replenish each other. And then they're going to hit back with a bunch of mortal wounds at like an 18-inch range and just obliterate all of the balloon dwarves that they touch. So like Change Host is actually a really good matchup against this list if the Change Host is played correctly.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason. I mean, I'm going to be honest. There's a reason why Reliant is playing Change Host right now. So it's because it has good answers to every army that's out there right now.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right. So any more about Inriggers? Or are we going to move on?
No, I mean, that's the heart of them, is that they're going to fly, they're going to have high mobility. And by the way, that grapple hook, they can use that to like pull themselves out of combat if they need to. So they can shoot 24 inches after they've done their shooting attack, rip themselves out of combat. It's movement that's away from enemies, not as a move. And because of that, it's not a retreat, according to FAQ right now.
Rubber banding.
Yes, so they can bounce out of combat and then charge another target. And so it actually gives them some very strategic mobility when for taking objectives and stuff like that. The mobility on these guys is almost offensive. And so those are the Inriggers. And the other thing that this list has, like the Chemists, everybody knows about the Chemists. The Chemists basically
brief for anybody who doesn't.
They're going to choose their star ability. One of these is my general. One of them isn't. It shows you how terrible the heroes are. One of these is my general. One of them isn't. And their main ability lets me choose a Skyfire unit within 10 inches and basically choose a weapon on their profile and increase the number of attacks by 1. And so we were choosing those saws, which is why they went from 8 attacks to 15 attacks. Because there are 7 models wielding it. Each one gains +1 attack. So you go from 8 to 15. The other ability they have is that they can reduce the number of attacks on an enemy profile, all enemy attacks characteristic by 1 to a minimum of 1 within 3 inches. And so big monsters or anything like that rushes in on them, they're going to be inherently debuffing enemy attacks that are incoming.
So it's better it's better on the big individual models than a horde, because there's not going to be enough guys that it's going to matter. Right.
Yep. Well, any guys that can reach them within 3 inches are debuffed. Right.
But so if I have 40 skeletons doing 4 attacks each, it's going to be only the ones within range that are going to matter. That they're going to lose one, as opposed to say a Maw Crusher with or a Thunder Tusk with just not Thunder Tusk, excuse me, a Stonehorn with just an obscene amount of attacks, and all their profile gets dropped by 1. Yeah.
1. Yeah. Yep. And so those guys are really good. Arcanaut Company, it's the other unit you're going to see in many of my lists. This is your battle line. This is your only battle line for KO, so they don't have any other option. They have to field 3 of these units if they're running a KO Allegiance army. Basically, I've been a preacher of the light skyhook since the book dropped, and I stand by it. These are weapons you can give 3 out of your 10 models. 3 out of every 10 models can have these. So all of my units have 3 light skyhooks. It's a 24-inch range, which is better than, ironically, better range than many of the other guns in the army. It's particularly the Thunder unit that recently just got nerfed. And this light skyhook is a 24-inch range, base 1 attack. It hits on a 4-up, wounds on a 3-up, -2 Ren D3 damage.
It's crazy.
So we're back to that -2 Ren D3 damage again.
Yeah.
Now let me point out another ability that this unit has called Glory Seekers. And if all of your attacks in a phase target a hero or monster for a unit, okay, you add +1 to hit roll. So in the shooting phase, if all of the range attacks from this unit target a monster or the same monster or hero, they get +1 to hit. So their profile goes to 3-up, -2 Ren, D3 damage. And you got to remember, if those targets are flying, I'm re-rolling all 1s.
Sweet.
And then the rest of these guys have these private 12-inch range privateer pistols with 2 attacks, 4-up, 1 damage, which is not bad, but I mean, that's 14 attacks that I'm going to throw out. On average, 3 of them are going to wound, that they have to make saves against. It's not bad for 10 guys. And then they'll all get sword attacks, which are just the default 4-up, 1 damage, no rend. So, yeah.
Not a bad battle line. Maybe it's not so sexy having to pick 3 of these because they're redundant and they don't look so impressive, because you don't have a lot of different aesthetic on the table, but they still do work.
They do, and they do important work at it with a 24-inch ranged attack that against the strategic targets you want to be firing at anyways. They're 3-up, -2 Ren, D3 damage.
So you have a very specific. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, they can apply pressure where pressure needs to be applied, and that's for a unit that can be sitting on an objective shooting 24 inches out.
So there's a very specific tactic that you're using in terms of how you're deploying and what you're looking to do on first turn with this army. And there's not a lot of variety here in terms of its capability. It seems pretty straightforward that you're going to choose one of these different options and you're going to go right in for the kill. Now, what I would like to find out, and the reason why I'm asking you this is because we always have these really good banters, sometimes off camera, but mostly on camera. Let's talk about if things go wrong. Let's say you go up against something that kind of blunts this alpha strike. And we also have to consider that this game is not just about killing. Yes, I know that there are kill points for ties, and when you're comparing people who have similar scores in tournaments, which is something that I see the merit of, but I don't really like because it fundamentally changes the game. But I understand why people are doing it, because then you have 10 people tied for the same score. You have to find some way to differentiate that. I get that. That's probably something that we should do a show on, stuff like that.
Sure.
We really should, because there are things that are changing the game that people are adding in as comp. So we'll get there. We'll do that another time. But there are going to be things that are going to fundamentally, spoil your plan. And when it comes to it, scenarios are where you're getting your points. It's not just killing. So let's say some of your plans are spoiled, and you have to figure out how to handle the actual scenario points. What is your backup plan with these guys?
Yeah, so what you're going to do is you're going to send in multiple waves of engine riggers. And that's why you have 3 units of these, is because things can go pretty bad for 1 or maybe even 2 of these units, but you're still putting consistent pressure on with the 3 units of 10 company and the final round of engine riggers. I mean, that's the advantage, is that you have a lot of wounds with these guys that are super choppy. That frigate, by the way, is going to be a not high priority unit because of all the riggers that are in their face. And so it's going to have some flexibility to navigate around the table, largely unmolested, normally. And it has 10 company that can reboard it and go get dropped off at an objective, for example.
Yeah, take a taxi to an objective, right? That's
exactly right. What I would say is that, oh, and by the way, here's something else I didn't mention. Briefly on the chemist, the Aether Shot Earbuster is my default kind of gun. It's one of the default weapons you'll see them equipped with regularly. And what it does is when, and you get like 2d6 attacks, you can pull up the chemist. Like by default, those chemists get, I think like 2d, they get, 3d6 attacks with their range on a range 10 weapon, which they're going to be within 10 inches. Like when you deploy, you can deploy them such that they're within 10 inches of a target. And, they on a 4-up, on average, you're going to get about 10 attacks. On a 4-up, 1 or 2 of those is going to wound. With a -2 rend, 1 of those is probably going to punch through against the target. And what the Aether Buster does is it forces that unit to immediately take a battle shock test. And so against those kind of strategic units, you can begin to thin them out very quickly to open up the charge for your engine riggers.
Very nice.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's a very strategic kind of weapon. It's good. You're going to see it again and again on my list. And so that frigate can do a little bit of work. It's not real good, but it, with that that's heavy sky cannon is still a cannon. It's like a 4-up, 2-up, -2 rend, d6 damage.
Is this the cannon that has kind of like the guy exposed in the exterior, just holding?
No.
Is that on the Ironclad? That's the one on the Ironclad.
That's on the Ironclad. Can you click on my camera?
Yeah, I can. Let me just grab it. Hold on.
It's that cannon.
Ah, okay. See, yeah, the one that has the guy exposed on the outside. And I know this is completely off on a tangent, but hey, it's my show.
Sure.
I'm using that as the top part of a Walker tank for a steam tank for my Duardin.
Yeah.
So I have like 40K Walker legs right underneath it, and it just looked like the perfect thing. So I have a bunch of like wires and and not wires, but cables and all kinds of other stuff that I'm putting on there. But it looked perfect as a turret with Walker legs underneath. Anyway, enough of that.
Yep.
So back to your list. Why don't we go move on to the next list, because this one is fantastic. But we want to make sure that we can get through all 3 of these and not do a 2.5-hour show, which we are known for. Okay. Boots on the ground.
So I wanted to do a different kind of list. You see a lot of lists that are, how do I want to say this? Like that are heavy engine rigger lists, that are heavy ship lists. I wanted to imagine what it might look like to have a semi-competitive ground list of troops of an army, and so it actually has me changing my skyport. So I'm running Barak Urbaz as my skyport. This is a heavy model unit, or heavy model force, as you can tell. I have over 110 models, which is not really common for these guys. And so for Urbaz, you're going to see a lot of similar things here, but some of it just a little bit different. So for Urbaz, I'm going to be, let me run through their abilities real quick. Their Seek New Prospects ability lets you re-roll battle shock tests for your units while they're wholly within the opponent's territory, which is kind of okay. I mean, this is a very shooty list, so that's not going to be super helpful. But having a shot at re-rolling battle shock tests is not terrible. Their amendment is called Take What You Were Owed, and what it lets you do is just gives you a bonus item. So without having to take a battalion, you get a second item in your list, which is always welcome, especially with KO, which have a nice, they have a suite of about, I think, maybe 12 to 18 items that they can choose from. So they have a decent kind of mix of items. Their footnote, where there's war, there's gold. And so this is actually a really interesting one, because when they're within, once per battle, one of your units that are within 3 inches of an enemy can either pile in an attack as if it were the combat phase, or shoot as if it were the shooting phase. So that one round that you need that extra, bit of choppy, or that one round you need that extra bit of punchy shooting, you can do that with that strategic unit. Now, some of the numbers are actually wrong on here. I'm just noticing, by the way. You may want to change this.
Okay.
On those 30 Arcanaut Company, those are 9 skyhooks each, not 12.
All right.
So, anyways, that was from a prior list, a copy-paste error. Anyways, so that was the footnote, where there's war, there's gold, a free pile-in or shooting. The other footnote, there's no trading with some people. We talked about this.
This one too?
Extra. Yeah, both of them. Because for every 10, you get 3.
Got it.
So those have 9 in each. There's the footnote. There's no trading with some people. Do an extra D3 mortal wounds when you do some damage. It's helpful. And then finally, the reason why everybody takes Urbaz or talks about taking Urbaz. I've seen very few of these armies on the table, but it is what it is. Their Chemist Supreme ability allows, whenever one of their chemists use that Aetheric augmentation, or Aetheric augmentation, which is the +1 attack, you get to choose 2 units to give +1 attack to instead of just 1.
Nice.
And so you get a second Skyfarer unit. So each Aether chemist can then buff 2 units instead of 1. Remember, when you buff, you don't give a buff to a unit. You give a buff to a weapon that unit carries. And so what you can actually do is to give multiple buffs to the same, like if you have 2 chemists, I can give 2 buffs to like, let's say I have 2 chemists and 2 Arcanaut Company, which is exactly what I have here. I could give 2 buffs to each unit. One, they can't stack for the same weapon, but I could give, like, for example, 1 to their light skyhooks, and I could give 1 to their swords. So with those units of 30, I have 21 swords, normally only getting 1 attack. I could double it to 42 attacks with their swords. And then also double their skyhooks to 18 skyhook shots.
Jeez.
Or I could, or their pistols have, you'd have 21 pistol shots. You could double to 42. No, 21 pistol shots that would double to 42.
Just thinking about how the volume of those skyhooks, 24 inches, -2 rend, die 3 wounds. That's just... a hellacious amount of shooting.
This list is going to put out 39 of those skyhook attacks.
Jeez.
Because you can see, by the way, I've had lists that have over 100 skyhook attacks in the prior iteration of this book before they nerfed the chemists. So I understand why they did it. Because it was truly, mathematically, it was oppressive. The kind of damage that stuff was putting down. So in this list, you can tell the backbone of it is your companies. You have 2 blocks of 30 companies, a block of 10 company. For your heroes, we have 2 chemists like we did before. One of them with the gun that causes battle shock. Likely those chemists are going to get buried in these units of 30, so they're body blocked away, maybe in the second line, so that if enemies come and crash into these units, they'll get debuffed from their the -1 attacks from the chemists.
Right. Yep.
And then, but the admirals, where the beautiful help, like this guy I was really mixed on, and he's the only guy with a command ability, and I kind of like him and I kind of hate him. He's 140 points. He's a 3-up save, 6 wounds. So he's basically like a 20 to 40 point overcosted Stormcast hero. And he only has 2 attacks. instead of the, like the 3 to 4 that you would expect this guy to be swinging around in melee. His range attacks are pretty not so good. I mean, they're not bad. They're -1 Ren, but his melee attacks, if he's going to be attacking, his melee attacks are where it's at, with 2 attacks, 3 up, 2 up, -2 Ren, 2 damage. We've seen profiles like that before.
I know, but he's an admiral. He's probably old. His physical days are way behind him.
Probably.
He's commanding fleets. He's not a sergeant on the ground.
He has some. Yeah, it's a really mixed ability because you really want this guy in the fray. Like, he's built for that, and I guess he can maybe survive. I don't know. I'm really mixed on this guy because, like, he gives a bonus. Like, if he charges, he gives other units in the same phase that are also charging within 18 inches a +1 to charge. So if he's the first in the fray, literally the name of the ability, then he gives everybody else that +1 to charge as well because he dove in first. Which, again, it's super flavorful. I love that, but mechanically, like, this guy's going to get murdered as soon as he pops his head out of a ship. And so the best place to put this guy is actually deep in the lines, like, or in a ship where he can't be shot, where like, if he's on a ship, he'll buff the ship, but we're not doing any of that. Against heroes and monsters, when he's attacking, he's going to reroll hit and wound rolls of 1, which is funny because, he just does that. But really, the neat thing about him is that he has 3 different command abilities that he can choose from. The one that will almost be universally spamming is he has the ability to give all friendly KO units within 12 inches battle shock immunity. Yeah. So he created the 12-inch battle shock bubble, which is really helpful when you have like 70 bodies of companies surrounding you shooting. And all of them are battle shock immune. And let me just tell you, as you're cutting your way through all of these Arcanaut company, remember the sky hooks that have all that Ren and are hitting like almost automatically and they're doing tons of damage? You can wait to lose those models until the very end because you can keep full effectiveness on those 30-man units until you've lost 22 wounds from the unit. Is that when it starts being kind of picking out of that? And so what you're going to do is you're going to run probably the bubble. To keep him alive, we've given him one of our items, which is the Master Wrought Armor, which gives him reroll 1s on saves. And so you're going to bury this guy deep in the line. And he had the base 3-up save. And you're going to try to put him on terrain deep in the line. So he's going to be a 2-up reroll 1s with 6 wounds. So without mortal wounds, hopefully he's going to withstand shooting. Like, that's the goal, is that he'll be able to take those hits. And then on top of that, we gave him Doughty Champion. I guess that's how we say that.
I thought it was Doughty.
Doughty. Yeah, Doughty's probably the way to go. Sorry about that.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
And that is going to give him an additional save. Where did I put my book? On a 5 or a 6 against, I believe it's mortal wounds only. So that gives him an additional. Oh, I know where I'll find it. Hold on. Okay. It's obviously getting late. My brain is losing its ability to recall information perfectly. Hold on. Where is it? Where'd we go? Okay. Doughty Champion. It is. I'm sorry, it was just mortal wounds. He gets basically a 5-up mortal wound save. Right. So still on terrain, he's 2-up reroll 1s with a 5-up protection against mortal wounds with 6 wounds.
Not bad.
So he's survivable. If you don't need to give battle shock immunity, you can actually trigger one of the other command abilities that he has. And it gives him on a 5-up, he can kick that wound out to one of his KO allies nearby. So, like, the lookout for the boss, if there's a friendly Skyfarer, within 1 inch, if you suffer the wound or mortal wound, you can roll a dice on a 5-up, that unit suffers a mortal wound instead. And so he can push wounds out to allies if he doesn't want to make them battle shock immunity. Got it. Yeah, so, I mean, you have that option. You're not going to use it in this list, but other lists you would. A variant of this list that's an Order Allegiance, I definitely do use that ability. Anyway, so this has a bunch of company, as you can see, a bunch of blocks are going to be super shooty. With this list, you wouldn't be afraid to string these guys out. And so you're going to, like, string tails back to the bubble, the 10-inch bubble, because you're going to have the general likely. I would probably have the general close to both of my chemists, so they create a little hero bubble. Maybe I might deploy one chemist forward in one of the bubbles so that the ear buster can shoot and potentially battle shock units, but the admiral's definitely going to be very deep in the lines. And then on top of that, so in addition to buffing the with the chemist buffing the companies, because remember you're going to basically hand out 4 chemist buffs every turn. So you're going to double your skyhooks, both the skyhooks, to go to 36 skyhooks shots from those 2 units. And then you're probably going to buff your engine rigger unit, and then you can send another buff to, like either the 3rd company of 10 shots, or you can send that extra. If your admiral's in melee combat, you can bump him up to 3 attacks from 2 attacks with that nice profile. You have a couple options, but this has that that engine rigger unit that is the highly mobile, the 12-inch move with the grapple hooks and all that stuff. And so they can be kind of a strategic can opener unit. But more importantly, you have a block of 30 Volkite Berserkers standing in front of all of these company. And Volkites are my new best favorite battle line unit. They're not technically battle line for KO, which is why you end up running 3 units of company. But what they do is you're going to equip them with war picks and shields. I love these guys. I've been singing their praises since they got their point adjustment back at the start of the year during the trial points. The big deal with these guys is with their shields in melee combat, they're going to be 4 up instead of 5 up, and they're going to have a 4 up ward save against both normal wounds and mortal wounds. So you have 30 of these guys. They're just really just a meat shield to hold points, to be a hard unit to hold points and to prevent the enemy from chewing through your lines or to chewing through a strategic point. Each model is going to have 2 attacks, and they're going to have rend 1 on those 2 attacks. If this unit gets a charge off, because again, these aren't normally going to be chargers. These are going to be aiming at holding points and playing defensively. But if they do get a charge off, you're going to roll a dice for every model that's still surviving. On a 6+, you're going to do a mortal wound. So on average, with a block 30 of these guys on a charge, you're going to chuck 30 dice. And of those 30 dice, you're going to cause, on average, 5 mortal wounds. Which is not too shabby. So these guys are just like a harder kind of like a meteor resource. And then, because that's something that KO really lacks is any kind of staying power. And so the Volkite Berserkers bring that.
It's amazing considering that the KO are almost all armored and the Volkites are pretty much half naked.
And the Volkites are the more durable ones, certainly.
Yeah.
And then finally, I round out this list with a Gryph-hound. And it's because basically everything in this list shoots. And if you're going to be stringing units out, what's going to matter with the Gryph-hound is that if anybody sets up any units from like a Stormcast, Deep Strike or anything like that, so basically you're going to guard one of your flanks with a Gryph-hound. If anybody pops up on there, what you're likely going to do is, like, remember how I talked about having tails of units like strung out? You're going to do that, and if the tail is within the X inches, it'll trigger the whole unit to fire, which means the 24-inch skyhooks will catch the enemy. Because of where the tails are, and so it'll protect your stuff. And this, like something like that Gryph-hound, by the way, would protect against deep striking other KO ships, for example.
Right.
So that could be really problematic for the enemy, is what I would say. And the unit, this list sets up at 10 under points, so you may be so it's at 1990. So you may actually be able to net a
triumph.
A triumph.
I mention that in as many shows as I can because I think a lot of people forget that if you're down 10, even it could be a big deal. A lot of people try to max out their points, but don't forget them because I've had a couple of bouts where I've had it and then I forgot it. Yep. I forgot to use it.
Yep. Oh, I've forgotten to use it in so many tournament matches. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. All right, so let's get.
So the downside of this list, though, is that it's a high drop. And so you're not going to get to use first. And so you are actually susceptible, ironically enough, to hard alpha striking lists.
Right, but if somebody's
because
going to deploy right up in your grill, you got that. He's got that Griffhound to help, at least on one flank.
yes, and not only that, what I would likely do is if I saw something like that coming, I would deploy my berserkers in a ring around everybody else and make them alpha strike my berserkers. And my berserkers, that unit might explode, but then I can tell you when I go, my company will blow them off the table because they are in range of every single gun, including all of my short 12-inch guns. And that's 2 attacks per model. And so they would literally just shoot whoever it is off of the table after something like that.
Right. All right. So, anything last about this list before we go to the third one?
No, this is more of a fun list. It's not hyper competitive. I mean, what I would say is this. If you wanted to have a more competitive version of this list, there's a couple alternate builds you could do. And the one that I would actually suggest doing is to you, instead of going KO Allegiance, which had the which is giving you, granted, it's giving you the double chemist buffs, you would instead go Order Allegiance. Surprisingly enough, what you do is you'd grab the Inspiring trait on your general, which makes all units within 6 inches battle shock immune. And so immediately you negate your #1 penalty, which is being outdropped and alpha struck, because you get rid of their ability to battle shock your troops off the table. And like you give the general the admiral a Phoenix Stone for healing. You're going to drop 10 of those company, because now that block of 30 Volkites serves as your 3rd battle line, so you don't need that unit of 10 company. Right. And you're going to drop them. You're going to probably drop that Griffhound, or at least I would. I'm sorry. No, I would drop the company, and it would let me pick up a 2nd Griffhound. I'm sorry. Right. I would pick up a 2nd Griffhound.
So I can guard
my 2 flanks.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So I have a Griffhound on both flanks, and I would actually, interestingly, also pick up a Rune Smiter on foot.
I'm going to pull him on.
Yeah, so the Rune Smiter on foot, for those of you guys who don't know, is the other piece of the Volkite Berserker puzzle. So the Rune Smiter on foot, what he does is when you deploy him, you can deploy a Fire Slayer unit like in basically the equivalent of the Aether Sphere, so you can deep strike them 9 inches out. And so it gives you the option of deep striking those Berserkers if you want. It would also give you the ability, if you didn't want to deep strike with him, you could deploy him back and have him buff just that Fire Slayer unit and give them reroll all wounds. Or let me just say this, you don't have to deploy him at all. You could just deploy him in like tunneling, not deploy any unit with him, and have him pop up mid-game onto an objective to claim it. Or, late in the game when maybe an objective is unguarded. His presence off the table would force them to leave models on every single objective.
It seems like the Rune Smiter on foot, which, by the way, is one of the extra option models that you can make from the Magmadroth kit. Am I correct in that?
Say that.
That's where it comes from. This particular model. I mean, I'm sure you can convert it, but this particular model is one of the 3 hero figures you can have in the Magmadroth kit.
Yep.
With that, him and the unit of the Volkite Berserkers seems like a well-rounded and extremely viable ally list up to 400 points.
Nope. Because the 30 Berserkers are 330 points, and so he pushes.
Oh, you can't take him. Oh,
right.
No.
Yeah. It was designed. I think the points were designed very intentionally to push that out of the realm of possibility.
I've seen a couple of those.
I should have kept my mouth shut.
Well, somebody was
when I was talking about how good the combo was between this guy and the 30 Berserkers as an allied contingent.
Right, so you can't take it. All right, so I had my points off. Yeah, I've looked at a bunch of those types of things. Like I was looking at Seraphon and a bunch of other like 400-point blocks with combos. There's a bunch of them that you can tell they just priced out of.
Okay. This is one of those. This is why your Order Allegiance is, because you could take him with the Volkite block and not worry about it. And you're gaining the Battle Shock immunity bubble as well.
Right.
And so like overall that's a more refined list with still the punchiness of the Endrinriggers and the deep striking the Volkites and all that stuff. So I still think that's a pretty hard list that most people are going to struggle to deal with.
Nice. All right, let's go to the last list. And this is Aerial Superior. I think you should have called it Hariel. just to use
Ariel
that
Serial.
joke from
Dez.
From Dez in the chat. That should be your renamed list here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So the other one. So this was my desire to want to have a ship heavy list.
Which you'd think that that's what this army would be.
It's so hard to have a competitive ship heavy list. It's so hard. And so I struggled and struggled and struggled with what this might look like because I really wanted to have a ship heavy list. I don't think 3 ironclads will do it, and it didn't do it. You know, if you look at the GT, they didn't place in it. 3 ironclads didn't place in the top 10.
Right.
But I think you might be able to get there with 2 ironclads and a Grunstock gun hauler. And let me explain.
Wait. What's that? I don't think I've ever seen this one in the wild. A gun hauler?
A gun hauler, yeah. So the funny thing is like this is what nobody runs, and I've been a very vocal critic of the gun hauler. But if you're wanting to run a ship list, it has some value, and so hear me out. Well, let's go through the. So let me start before I jump to that. I'll jump to that at the very end.
Yeah, let's go through the top down.
Because I think that you can actually run a gun hauler like helpfully in this list. Okay. This maintains a 3-drop list. I'm running Zilfin, and so if you'll remember, Master of the Skies reroll 1s against flyers, hit and wound. Don't argue with the wind. Is when you run, you get 6s. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. You auto run 6s. There's always a reason if you look for it. Is that extra free move at the beginning? There's no trading with some people. Is that extra mortal wound punch once per game? And then the Superlative Sailors is the 6-up mortal wound save on all ships, which in this list includes both ironclads and the gun hauler. Okay, so then let's go to. So you guys recognize before we jump to the ships, you guys recognize what the company do. The ironclads, unlike the frigates, the ironclads actually are heavily gunned. They have lots of options, and the gun hauler, or not the gun hauler, they can have 20 bodies per ship. And so the first ironclad I have with 20 company, the other one I had with 10 company with the hero and with the 9 engine riggers. And so let's talk about like what their firepower is. I've equipped. So of those top 3 guns, they only get 1 of those. Let me be very clear about that.
Yeah.
So you're going to choose which one of those. I go for the Aethermatic volley cannon. So initially, I went with the Great Sky Cannon. I was like, yeah, neg2 Ren, d6 damage, let's do this. But you only get 1 shot.
Yeah.
And you feel that 1 shot when you miss. That hurts. It does. Like, you feel it. And so on average, when that 1 shot does go through, you're going to do a d6 damage. You're going to average to 3.5 damage. So because you're at 4 up to hit, realistically, you're going to average 1.75 damage from that Sky Cannon. Because 50% of the time, you're going to straight miss with the Sky Cannon.
Yeah.
So let's go down to the Aethermatic Volley Cannon. You get 10 shots at 4 up, neg 1 rend, 1 damage. So you're going to average 2.5 wounds with the Volley Cannon. So you're going to average more wounds with that volley, more consistent, more wounds with the Volley Cannon.
But which cannon looks better? Which cannon looks cooler?
Both of them look pretty sweet. Right. I do like the Volley Cannon though, because it looks like a big Gatling gun, as opposed to the cannon, which is kind of stubby.
Yeah.
And so like I actually like the Volley Cannon, but it's easy to magnetize any of these.
Yeah.
And so I run both of mine with Volley Cannons because if I need neg2 rend, I have Skyhooks. You know, I have other neg2 rend options. This gives me volume of attacks when for clearing out chaff and stuff like that. Because chaff is pretty scary. And so, against this kind of army, because you need to be able to put damage and pressure on things where you want them, where you need to put pressure, when you need to put pressure. This army is also going to be running with the Aether Shock torpedoes, which are 12 or 24-inch range. Sorry, they'll start with 4 of these before their damage. Do 4 up, 3 up, neg 1 rend, d3 damage. So you can put out some damage from their torpedoes. And as well, they all have Aether Shock carbines, which are going to be, for attacks, they will be, you'll start with 8 attacks there. You'll do 3 up, 4 up, neg 1 rend, 1 damage. So you're going to throw out a lot of attacks. If you're charged, you know, like you have some defenses and stuff like that, but this is not a melee this is not a melee unit. Let me point out their flagship ability. One of their ships can raise like their flag and grant a buff to all other ships. Only one of your ships can do this. Your options are either add +2 to attacks with the Aether Shot Carbines, which are your short-range 12-inch guns. Now, what's significant about this Aether Shot Carbine situation is that that lets you add 2 attacks on every ship has Aether Shot Carbines. So both the Ironclads and the Gun Hauler all have this gun, and so you're actually adding 6 attacks when you use this ability.
Nice.
The other one is, you know, reroll hit rolls of 1 in the shooting phase. So if you needed to put wounds on ground troops, you could do that. You know, if you can't rely on the ones to reroll to hit and wound for flyers, you could also add 3 inches to the range of all your missile weapons. So you go to like 21 inches on your volley cannons, and you go up to 15 inches on your carbines for everybody. Or then the last one is reroll hits and wounds 1 for attacks against targets that fly. You already have that by default from Zilfin. And so these guys have some good firepower that they can put out. And so the interesting thing is, one of these ships is going to be equipped with the Aether Spheric engines. The other one can be pushed forward with the ability, the favorable wind, so they can move up in their hero phase, and they move up again in their movement phase. So they move up 16 inches base, which means that you are a total of 8 inches out from the enemy. So one Ironclad's 8 inches out from the enemy, the other one is 9 inches out from the enemy. And then they unload with all of their guns on the top of one. And they're going to spit out of their troops. You're going to have 1 unit of those engine riggers that are going to hog wild turn 1, that are going to jump out and you know, like, and fly forward and grapple hook and charge something and cut it down. So here's the interesting addition that I've chosen, which is the gun hauler, the Grunstock gun hauler. Can you go ahead and pull up that unit?
I thought this was just a rumor. I thought it was like a joke.
It kind of is a joke, but I own one. I have one on my shelf, and I want to put it to good use. So this is a list that I put together to play this. It's a 10 wound. Functionally, it's a 10 wound chariot. That's 220 points. That has a cannon attached to it. So you're going to run the sky cannon. So 18 inches, 4 up, 2 up, -2 Ren, D6 damage. So it has that once per, you know, like that really good cannon shot sometimes. And then it's going to have 2 default, you know, Aether Shot Carbines that we've talked about, that are those 12-inch ranges, that are going to get that buff to go up to 4 attacks. But the ironic kind of perk here is going to be the escort vessel ability. What the escort vessel ability does is, if it's within 3 inches of another sky vessel, you can roll a dice anytime that other sky vessel takes a wound, and on a 5 or more, the Grunstock gun hauler can take that wound instead.
That extends that 18 wounds on an Ironclad out a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does, because that means that it'll have 1/3 more wounds, so it'll push it to 24 wounds.
Jeez.
Each of those gun haulers, by the way, if they're not unloading troops, so after the first turn, they can batten down the hatches, so they re-roll 1. So they're 4 up, re-roll 1s on those big ships. They have a base 18 wounds. This guy, shoved between the 2 of them, extends both of their lifespans approximately. I mean, he only has 10 wounds total, but statistically, at least if there's focus fire any one ship, he'll extend its life by 6 wounds. Each of those other ships, by the way, are also healing 1 wound 50% of the time, because each of them have like a default engine rigger on each of those ships.
Right.
So in the course of like a 5-turn game, they're going to heal 2 to 3 wounds as well. So you're going to get 27 wounds on average with this guy next to him, next to those two ironclads. And here's where it gets interesting. Against Tzeentch, which this army is uniquely set up to fight, because they will shoot all the chaff off the table with the volume of attacks, and those Endrinriggers will go in and go choppy. What's interesting is that against mortal wounds, you'll get your 6-up save against the mortal wound on the ironclad. If you fail that special mortal wound save, the Zilfin one, you'll get a 5-up save to push that mortal wound to the gun hauler. When that mortal wound comes over the gun hauler, you'll get an additional 6-up save from Zilfin again.
Right. I played shenanigans similar to that with zombies and necromancer. Yep.
And so what you can actually do is you can extend the lifespan of those two gun haulers even more. If you really wanted to put, or the two ironclads even more, if you really wanted to push it with this list and go a different direction, you could actually swap out the chemist for like an admiral, or for a non-chemist, basically. Do one of the other heroes as your general, and then you could actually break up that Endrinrigger unit into 3 units of 3 Endrinriggers, because each Endrinrigger unit, if they're next to one of these ships, is going to heal that ship for 1 wound in the hero phase. And if you really wanted to, you could put an Endrin Master as your hero that's your general, and he's going to heal an additional D3 wounds. So you could how you would kit out those Endrinriggers is all with ranged attacks. And like your main guy's gonna have a sword, but then you'll have each one will have a Gatling gun, and then you'll have a drill attack on all those guys. And you could actually auto heal any one of these ships. You'll go a D3 plus 3 wounds plus 50% of 1 more. If you equip the Endrin Master with the auto heal, you get 50% chance of healing for 2 more wounds. 50% twice for 2 more. So you could have up to 8 wounds of healing on any one ship any turn. And so you could just busily have all of your ships basically warding saves and then re-healing any damage that you've lost as they're serving as kind of meat shields for the rest of your army.
I don't know how competitive this is in a high-end scene.
Yeah. I don't think it's real competitive, but I think it's fun.
But it's fun, and I was exactly where I was going to go. And if I were to collect this army, this is probably the list that I would take, because this is what I envision Kharadron Overlords looking like. A couple of big ships and some troops. Now, I'm curious. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm sure you do. Is there a start collecting box?
No.
I was going to say, man.
And I wouldn't even expect one of the army boxes this Christmas. You got to remember that Fire Slayers didn't even get an army box for almost 2 years.
Yeah. It's too bad.
And if they do release one, I hate to say it, but I know what the starting box, getting started box is going to be.
What do you think?
If they release it, it'll be 10 KO, it'll be 10 company, your guys on foot.
Right.
It will be a gun hauler, so it'll be the bad ship that nobody wants to run. And it'll be a navigator. That's probably what it's going to be.
But I don't know. I don't think that's worth $85.
Well, mathematically, it's certainly worth 85.
Yeah, but not mathematically if you're not going to use 2 out of the 3, unit sets there. Yeah, because I could just imagine an ironclad with maybe a unit of 10 Arcanauts, and that would be unbelievable.
Yes, it would be awesome, but you got to remember, that's the value of that you're getting out of the money value. Because remember that ironclad is a $115 model,
right?
So it's the equivalent of what you're getting out of the Fire Slayer box, and you're getting less actual usable models. Because you got to remember with the Fire Slayers, you're getting 2 heroes on foot, a mounted hero on the Magmadroth, and then 10 Volkite foot soldiers.
I know.
With this, you're getting even less. You're only getting 11 models instead of 13.
I know. First of all, that the Magmadroth kit was heavily priced and reasonably, maybe a little overpriced, but reasonably a good value because you got extra heroes in that.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you put that together with, and I bought it way before it was, I mean, when it was an
Yep.
individual kit, just the Magmadroth.
Yeah.
And then, but you put that together with a Get Started. It's an obscene Get Started box.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There's very few others like it of value.
Yeah.
And so I just like they may release something. I think you have a better bet of doing a limited release like Christmas box, but I still don't even think that they'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see what they release if they release something in a couple months, in a month and a half or so.
Yeah. All right. So we got 3 interesting lists here, and 3 different ways to kind of styles of play with the same army. We got some nice options with allies. I like that last one, just like you said, because it looks like it would be fun to play, and I just like the idea of just having the equivalent of a battleship or 2 on the table, and just seeing the idea of like a series of broadsides. You have a
fleet basically.
Fleet, exactly.
I mean, that's what it's designed to be. Like that's why I designed that list, and I think it would be perfectly competitive. It would have remember, this is gonna have a huge alpha strike because one of those is gonna deep strike, one of those is gonna move up turn 1, from the free movement, and everybody gets a broadside. Everybody moves and unloads all of their guns.
Right. So when you say that, you said one is going to be in the Ethersphere, one is going to be on the table, and the frigate's going to be on the table, and all the guys are going to be in the ships. So you're going to essentially have a 3-drop army, which is good. That's a lot of the highly competitive lists are around 3, upwards or lower, whatever. But 3 is a good number, and it's a low model count. The only disadvantage I could see is the potential for having issues with the quantity horde armies that will override you on next to objectives, but then you just whittle them down.
Right, and you play a cat and mouse game where you just keep them at range, because you have an 8-inch range at least, or 8-inch movement, and you can move and fire, and you can keep them largely at like 18 inches. So like you can just keep moving and shooting and moving and shooting. You don't have to engage in close combat.
Well, I like that. It seems like it's not as powerful as the other 2 lists, but I like the theme of it. I think if I picked up this army, I'd probably pick it up as just something fun to throw down on the table every once in a while, maybe bring to some tournaments. But I like the low model count of that army and what you have on the table. But even
let me just say, I love painting these guys.
Yeah,
it's really like they're really fun to paint. Like,
well, what's your routine?
Enjoyable.
What's your routine? Because there's some very specific color schemes. There's a lot of metal. So give me a quick rundown of like your basic without the one color that differentiates you from everybody else. But as far as the basic, this is how I'm working on my entire army, even the ships. What's your quick color scheme or quick color method?
So I'll put them together, do all my conversions, and then I'll zenithal the model. So like a dark gray starting, like a German camo gray or whatever.
After a black undercoat?
I don't black undercoat. I
rarely do that ever anymore. Yeah.
Long ago from Vince, I use what's called German Panzer Gray.
Oh, which is a super,
it's a super dark gray as my base.
Yeah.
And then I'll zenithal over this with like a light gray. Then I'll do like a white at a high angle, and then I'll go in and paint. It depends if it's the base company. I'll paint my blues. I use where is he? I use the scale 70. Or I'm sorry, the scale color, the scale 75. This is like Cannabrick blue, which is like a deep navy, like a saturated blue. So I use that on like the jumpsuits, and then I'll hand paint like the metal and stuff like that. And then I'll just go in and it like they're highly detailed, but they're a joy to paint.
Well,
against my mostly metal
what's
guys.
What's your color for metal? Is it all like lead belcher? I mean, what are you using for your metals? Because it seems like there'd be a lot of brasses and bronzes on this too.
I didn't want to do bronzes, so I wanted to do like black and metal, and I wanted to do silver. And so like I have a lot of like very subtle shades, and so at first glance they look mono color. Like I have to deal with a lot of like I wanted to have to deal with like a lot of very this whole army has been a practice in like very subtle shifts in color. So like my silvers, I'm washing with blue, like nightshade. But for my base metal, I do all metal colors. So Vallejo metal colors, which spray super nicely. And so my really dark metal I do in magnesium, which is like the black. And then I have, and then my lighter stuff I do in like the dark aluminum, which is right here. And then my highest stuff I do in silver, which is right here. And for my lighter stuff, I'm washing in nightshades, which are like the blue metals, like the blue washes on the silver metals, and then I highlight it back up. And on the darker metals, I'm washing in like blacks, in like, you know, inks, or I'm doing like on the armor, or on some of them I'm doing oil washes actually over the metal, and then I'm highlighting those back up. So yeah, so I've done a lot of like metals, which and then I do for my golds, I'm using Liberator Gold with sepia washes.
Got it.
So
great. Well, I know. Wait to see what they look like in on the table with some of your after battle reports. I wish you would do more battle reports. Actually, it would be nice. I would tune in.
Yeah, time wise, like man, I'm maxed. I'm maxed.
I know.
Bandwidth.
I know. I used to do, you know, majority battle reports, and unless you do them live, which I would love to do, it's just I personally I'm not a fan of the live version of them. I like a little more in depth, you know, detail, and it seems like there's always a rush with the live ones. There's some people that do them very well. I don't. But I like the slideshow because you really can get into it. Doom of Darkness does. Yes. Yeah,
like I like the live format with the talking overlay. That's the actual format that I like the most.
Yeah, I see what you mean. We sped up maybe, and
it's like where it's sped up, and so you're getting the actual like play-by-play and what's moving around, but you're also getting the kind of tactical discussion over top from the player.
The only problem I have with that is that it tends to be very far away. And when I take pictures, and when I know a lot of other people do, I mean, I didn't invent the routine. I mean, there's plenty of others that pave that way and do it really well, and there's some that have incredible production value. But I like seeing, you know, the in-depth, even turn-by-turn decisions. That's just
I had
my
no. If I had my druthers, I would have two camera angle. I would have like a zoom up, and I would have like a top down.
I was gonna say
that I could alternate between as I'm talking over the.
But the thing is, it takes a tremendous amount of time to
edit them. It does,
and that's why they've fallen off for me. I must have about 3 dozen of these that are sitting in the hopper, and I will get to some of them, but some of them are never going to see the air, unfortunately.
Well, Vint and I will definitely do we'll probably do a processing, like when we leave the event, we'll do a live show on November 5th when we're driving away, like we did from NashCon, and recount all of our games and talk through the event. I
look forward to it. I will be watching it while I'm painting. All right. Any final comments or any final opinions about KO that you want to share that we haven't already gone over?
Yeah. I mean, I focused a lot on a handful of units. We have 2 units I haven't talked about: Sky Wardens, and I haven't talked about Thunderers. Sky Wardens, I think there's a use for them. I like Sky Wardens quite a bit, in fact. I use them in my mixed Fire Slayer lists. They're great kind of mobile gun platforms, like highly mobile. They're balloon boys with 12-inch move, but they have really good guns. And so I like them, especially in hybrid lists. And they also fit well oftentimes to help fill gaps or holes for like objective holders and stuff like that. But I didn't include them in any of these lists. I don't want to think that you discourage, I'm just disparaging them at all. I think Sky Wardens are fantastic. I'm still wrapping my head around Thunderers. They nerfed them really hard. And so basically you have to go either all default guns, or you go as like a full mixed weapon profile. And, the more and more I've thought about it, I think that there's going to be a use for Thunderers, but it needs to be strategic and targeted, is what I would say. And so they're not going to fit in every list, and you have to build lists around them in order to use them well, I think, is what I would say. And none of the lists that I've been running have been using Thunderers. So again, I don't want to say Thunderers are bad. just math-wise, they just don't fit in my list unless I build for them. And then I look at it and I'm like, why am I not just running more Arcanaut company? So yeah, that's what I would say. But like I said, I think Wardens are awesome, and I would love to hear Des talk about Wardens sometime. So.
Yeah, I just shot him over a message in the chat and just said, hey, you want to send me lists? Send me a message. I'll have you on, because he said he wanted to unlock Sky Wardens. I'm like, sure. We're happy to hear what he has to say. He's certainly been vocal in the chat, talking about commenting a lot of the stuff that you have, and with a lot of enthusiasm. Yeah,
what I'd say is, so Gary Percival, I mentioned his list that he took and placed well, like 7th or 8th at the GT, the Grand GT, and he had 12 Sky Wardens. So I mean, like it's a good unit, and again, they come out at a nice round 400 points, so they fit in really nicely. 12 of them do as an allies contingent.
Yeah, I'd like to have Gary on too. Now, in terms of the next show that we're going to have you on, because we haven't had you on with enough frequency, and it's a matter of schedule and other stuff. Yep. Just looking ahead, what would you like to unlock for the next show? I know there's some armies that you don't have that I'd like you to unlock. That's
what armies
personally. Well, I'd love to get your take on Seraphon. I'd like to do.
I cracked the code.
I know. I know. I would like to do that, but there's another one. I would like to find something that people don't normally get, based on the GHB 17, that might matter. It doesn't have to be a top 3 army, but I'd like to see how you can rewrite the book on some of these sub-factions, like Beastmen or stuff like that we haven't traditionally seen do very well, that now have a whole lot more capability and spectrum. I know that for instance, Vince has talked about Beastmen several times, and how a lot of things with the monsters from the Arcanum that really are kind of crazy. There's been I've seen a lot of conversation about various different crazy lists. A lot of the ones that everybody's talking about, we're gonna see those on the net. I want to try and find the ones that people aren't talking about. Maybe that aren't being presented.
I think Pestilence is one.
I'm doing that with. I got that with Vince. That's part 2. So yeah, we're going to be doing that
because he's been talking to me. I think that Daughters of Cain. I think Daughters of Cain. There's some lists out there that are pretty crippling.
Mm-hmm. I know you were close to going hog wild on that.
I almost went, when I got done with my current KO, I almost went full Daughters of Cain for 6 months. But I knew that as soon as I finished that list, they would change, they would errata the wording after I broke it. And so
then you're doing a service.
I'd prefer not to have to spend all those hours painting.
Well, you don't have to spend them. We do it here. The word goes out. Let somebody else make that investment. You don't have to do it. You've done your job. You've contributed to the bottom line of the stock price of GW with all your purchases.
I don't think my contribution changes GW's stock price at all.
Even with all those boxes. Oh, come on! You put out a lot of
those boxes. No. The other one, I think that there's a list that people aren't talking about. Is I think I really honestly believe there's a Swift Talk agent list out there. That nobody's talking about. And
we've talked about Swift Talk a couple times. I think I did a video on it. But
they get allies now. But they get allies now.
But they didn't get allegiance. How did they not get a sub-faction allegiance? I don't understand.
A lot of Order offers a lot of good things. And I'm not poo-pooing Order. And in fact, there's some really neat stuff in Order now. Because Swift Talk can pick up the really good Tempest Eye, which gives them the bonus to mobility, +2 or +4 inches of move, and +1 save turn 1. Which, when you're pushing forward a block of 30 Shadow Warriors, that are all going to be saving on like 3 up or 2 up first turn, and they're going to be like they're going to claim any actual objective that's out there. There's some meat on them, their bones.
Here's the ones that I want to see, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it. I see a bunch of people talking about it. I just don't see enough chatter about, and I'd like to go and highlight them. I like to see. I know that we're going to be seeing elf stuff coming, but I'd love to see dark elf list because I love the mechanics with the dark elves.
Okay.
I'd love to see something with high elves. I know we've seen some really interesting high elf stuff in a tournament recently. I know people have been talking left and right about Seraphon, but I really want to break Seraphon. I want to break it to the point where it's like, oh my fucking god, that's obscene. People have talked about it. We've talked about it. I know there's a bunch of other people. I would love to.
I cracked the code. Like I really cracked the code on Seraphon.
Let's do it.
First of all,
I've got probably about $900 in credit from tournament wins that I haven't spent, and I'm just looking for a reason to buy some Seraphon. Okay, I'm looking for it. I've been building all those tournament wins up, and and if death is next year, I'm gonna probably blow it before then because I'm just itching. But whatever. So there's that. And those are the ones, and I'm looking for some obscure stuff. And of course, I'm looking to do with Vince Beastman. Hey. Anybody out there who plays any of these armies, if you're a tournament player, if you want to send in lists, maybe I'll have you on the show. But yeah, I definitely would like you to think about some of these and let's get them on. There's going to be new battle tomes that are going to come out. We're going to devour those. I don't want to leave behind the juicy stuff that's that's from the GHB 17 that people are going to start forgetting, and it's there, and there's some cool stuff. And the great thing about the GHB 17 is it's reinvigorated a lot of these armies that they were kind of forgotten. They were kind of left behind, and now there's potential. There's really some interesting stuff to do with them. So yeah, a challenge for you. All right, that's it. That's our show. We've got a solid 2 hours, which is our. I guess it's kind of efficient for us, but it was a little bit late in the hours and a little bit just a little bit of grogginess. Thank you as always, Tom. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And everybody who look, I say this all the time. If you're watching me, I don't know how you're not also watching Vince and Tom on Warhammer Weekly, because these guys have it's a destination every week. If you're not watching Warhammer TV, the official channel on Twitch, you're probably setting your clock or watching sometime, if not live, sometime after the fact, Warhammer Weekly. That you guys are just so diligent. It's a steady, rock solid show every week. C average, but it's always there. Okay,
you're so generous. Is what I would say.
But it's great, and but it's always a pleasure to have you on. If there's like 2 people that are not subscribed to me, but are that are subscribed to me, but not to you guys, you got to subscribe to Warhammer Weekly and watch that show. We'll have you on again, and thank you so much, Tom.
Yep. Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.